Hi, I'm Patrick Nyland, and this is the road to publishing my first book. Obviously, I'm nowhere near publishing that book. It's only week 3, but the idea is to make progress every week. The first 2 weeks have gone super smoothly. However, this week I'm kind of facing a major roadblock. I guess major is the wrong word. It's not like I've lost my inspiration to write or anything. It's just that I've run out of ideas to write about. Let me explain. Operation Ark, my current work in progress, is a series of short stories about humans escaping the Earth on space stations that turn out to be genetic testing facilities. Since Operation Ark is a series of short stories, before I even started this video series, I made a list of short story ideas and I've been pulling from that ever since. The problem is that list of story ideas is drying up. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing because my favorite part of the writing process is the brainstorming phase. I love sitting down at the computer for 15 minutes and coming up with as many crazy ideas and just writing them all down on the page. On top of the fact that the brainstorming phase is so much fun, it also comes with a lot of writing inspiration, which I could probably use. Look, I'm not saying I'm running out of writing motivation, but I started a challenge on June 3rd on TikTok to write 1 word per follower, and I have about 3,000 followers on TikTok. And yeah, now it's Thursday, June 20th, so it's been 17 days, and yeah, I can definitely use a little bit of extra motivation. Captain's log. If you're receiving this transmission, know my writing motivation runs very low. It is day 16 since I took on this challenge to write 1 word per follower, and I don't know how much longer I can persist. I can see writer's block creeping forward on the horizon. If you can, please send support, and do it soon. This is Captain Patrick Nyland, signing off. Also, yes, I know in last week's video I said I want to film earlier than Thursday this week, but what can you do? Back to this brainstorming session, I've noticed so far in the stories I've written for Operation Ark, which is about 17 now, a lot of the stories have something to do with AI or humans augmenting themselves with technology. A lot of them are very tech-based and not as much genetic-based as I thought they would be. And that on its own is not a problem. I think it's really cool in this Ark setting of the story to kind of see how humans interact with some of these futuristic technologies. That being said, with this brainstorming session, I really want to work on coming up with more ideas for stories that have to do with genetic testing. I think the main reason most of my stories so far have to deal more with technology is it's something that I'm more comfortable with. As a computer engineering student, I've literally made robots in college. I'm very comfortable with them. On the other hand, when it comes to genetics, I honestly have no idea what I'm talking about. I know the general concepts of evolution, such as natural selection, but even then, I feel like a lot of my understanding is a little bit shaky. So before I go into this brainstorming session, as much as I want to jump in right now, I think I'm going to spend the rest of today learning about evolution and genetics and all that fun stuff. And maybe from watching some videos on biology and what scientists are currently working on in genetic testing, I can actually come up with some really cool ideas for these stories. Because not for nothing, as crazy as some of the ideas in the stories I've written so far about technology, a lot of them are based in real world studies that are happening right now. Which on one hand is kind of awesome, and on the other hand is pretty terrifying. But yeah, right now I'm going to become an expert in genetics within an hour, and then after that I can brainstorm ideas, maybe tomorrow. The challenge that comes with creating a lot of these Operation Ark story ideas is there's kind of 2 elements to it. The first element is the technological experiment or the biological experiment or whatever's going on funky in that ark. The ark being the space station that the story takes place in. The second part, which can actually be pretty challenging, is actually weaving a story around that experiment. A good example of this is in one of the experiments I came up with, the artificial gravitational ring in the ark never activated, which means the humans never had access to gravity. And then the experiment is seeing how humans evolved or didn't evolve in 1,000 years to live without gravity. Because, spoiler alert, in some of these experiments, everybody just dies. In fact, I think the record so far in the stories I've written for how quickly all the residents of the Ark died was 7 days. Total speedrun. Anyway, I feel like that experiment idea of humans living for hundreds of years without gravity is really cool. That being said, I don't necessarily have a story yet that I want to tell in that arc. Because the challenge is, yes, you're trying to explore this bigger idea of the experiment, but you're trying to do it through the lens of a story. Let's get researching.
This is Editor Pat from the future. My new goal is to go 1 vlog without saying that being said, or so yeah. Just 1 vlog.
So the way I like to do research when I'm writing a book, or when I'm doing anything for that matter, is I like to watch a few YouTube videos on the topic. I feel like when I watch something, I just retain more information. And then during or after every video I watch, I like to jot down a few notes that I found pretty interesting. Then when I'm done watching videos and I have a pretty broad understanding of what I was researching, it might be controversial for some people, but I like to go on ChatGPT and ask specific questions about the topic. And what I like about this, especially in the sense of when I'm writing a story, I might have really specific questions that I would otherwise have to look hours and hours to kind of get an answer for. Maybe hours is an overstatement, but I feel like in general, ChatGPT does a really good job of summarizing information. Back when I did that challenge to write a novella in a weekend where I didn't really have a lot of time, I really relied on ChatGPT to answer really quick questions about dwarf stars and brown dwarfs and all those stellar objects.
And I'm out cold. Yeah, at this point, I was really trying to push myself to write a little more, but I was completely drained from writing all night long.
I'll link that novella down below if you're interested. It's called Children of the Devourer, although I will remind you, I wrote it in one weekend, so keep the expectations low. I think the premise was pretty interesting, but the entire thing needs to be completely rewritten. I think it's actually worse than Europa, the book I wrote in one week. I'll link that down below too if you're interested. Again, I wrote it in one week. Expectations should be on the floor. Okay, time to watch a video about everything evolving into crabs. Technically, it's an oversimplification, but crab people are fun, so maybe we'll do a short story with crab people. Probably not. Crab people, look like crab, taste like people.
Crab people, taste like crab, talk like people.
I find it so funny in these jump roping time lapses where it looks like I'm basically levitating for a few seconds. That's right, it's time for the little fitness update subplot of this vlog. Just like writing a book, getting in better shape is something I've wanted to do for a while, but I've just always put it off. At first, I was a little bit worried that if I tried to push myself to be more fit at the same time as trying to push myself to write my first book, I would kind of burn out. But it's turned out to be the opposite. I find when I work out that I actually feel more writing motivation. So this is how I looked at the end of this week. I can definitely notice some difference compared to the first week. I do want to keep in mind that, your body changes a little bit every day based on how much water you're drinking, what you're eating, but it's definitely positive progress. What excites me too is the way I've been losing weight, similar to the way I've been writing more words, has been really sustainable compared to other ways I've attempted in the past. With these goals, sustainability is key.
So, it's Friday, June 21st, and now that I've written my 3,000 words for the day, I can finally focus on brainstorming. The way I like to brainstorm is I like to take a notebook out and I like to sit down in front of the notebook and come up with as many ideas as I possibly can. When I'm brainstorming, one of the rules I set for myself is I write down every single idea, no matter how ridiculous it seems, and that's because sometimes the most ridiculous ideas oftentimes become the best ideas. And a lot of times I've also noticed some of my worst ideas can often inspire my best ideas. I definitely think it's important while you're brainstorming to allow your mind to explore strange thoughts without fear of rejection. I've also noticed that I like to kind of try to move around when I'm brainstorming because it helps keep the juices flowing. When I go back up to Binghamton to get the rest of the stuff I left in my apartment, one of the things I'm most excited to bring home is I had a dry erase board that I could just stand in front of and brainstorm, and it was super helpful. I didn't use it as much as I wish I did at school, but I still love it. Last night I did a lot of research on genetics, and I found some really interesting experiments that scientists are currently performing on animals. A lot of them were kind of cruel, but the whole point of this story is to write stories about cruel experiments on humans. So while I do feel really bad for the animals, I don't feel bad at all for what I'm going to do to my characters. I'm really hoping that this brainstorming session is going to give me the spark I need to continue writing. Because the progress I've made so far writing Operation Ark in this video series has been incredible, and I want to keep that going. I'm going to get into it. So I ended up brainstorming for about a half hour, and then after that, it kind of felt like my mind was melting. But before that, I feel like I came up with a lot of good ideas. So the first dozen ideas I came up with basically were about horrifying genetic tests, but then after that, I kind of shifted my ideas in a different direction. And this is what's cool that happens with brainstorming sessions. You never really know where they're going to take you. So in addition to coming up with a bunch of horrifying genetic experiments, I also came up with a bunch of interesting economic experiments. Because as I was brainstorming, my mind really began to wander, and I began to wonder, how would you even get people to perform tasks on this space station if there's really no sense of economy the way you would have on Earth? Would there be money in space? Would there be some sort of honor system? Would they just kill people who didn't do their job well? But some of the funnest ideas I came up with were definitely genetic experiments. For Operation Ark, there are two categories of genetic experiments. The first are experiments where a factor within the space station is changed to see how humans will evolve to overcome it or not. One of the experiments I came up for that idea is a space station that becomes 1 degree hotter every single year. That sounds pretty awful. The second category is experiments where genes are actively being manipulated. And for that category, I came up with the idea where there's a zoo on one of the Arks where a lot of the animals are showing very human features. Also, I'm a true believer that no two authors are ever going to write the same idea exactly the same, so if I ever talk about an idea in one of these videos that you want to try out, feel free to do it. I feel like that brainstorming session went really well. Although I do want more ideas to write about, I think I'm going to give myself a little break because I've noticed when I push too hard, I kind of get stuck in like the same idea and like it's just not as new. So between tonight and tomorrow, I'll probably do a few more brainstorming sessions. And by the end of all those brainstorming sessions, I should feel really inspired going into next week. It is Saturday the 22nd, which means today I also have to edit this vlog for the week. Honestly, the editing process was a lot better last week than it was the first week, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. The worst part is honestly watching myself on camera mess up the same phrase over and over and over again. Anyway, I actually already wrote my 3,000 words for today. I actually wrote one of the stories that I brainstormed yesterday. It's a story about, well, I can't really give up too much information about this story because it'll kind of spoil the ending, but it's basically about an Ark where they're doing research to kind of find a cure for cancer. So the ending will obviously be super hopeful. I'm really enjoying all the ideas that came from the brainstorming session yesterday. In fact, I actually had another brainstorming session after that also went really well. So much so that I kind of want to end this week's vlog by doing one last brainstorming session. The thing is, I know if I do that right now, I'm not going to end up doing anything else today, so I decided to do two things I don't really want to do before I do that brainstorming session. The first thing is I have to apply to jobs. I'm going to be real with you. Right now, I'm really loving having all the free time in the world to just focus on my creative projects. Not only has it given me the time to start this vlog series, but I've also made so much progress on my work in progress. Seriously, I started Operation Ark from scratch 3 weeks ago, and I've already written 57,000 words. 57,000 words in 3 weeks. It's been awesome after 5 years of college to finally be able to explore my creative interests. That being said, while I do hope that one day I'll be able to support myself using creative projects, for now, I need a job. Last week I applied to a couple jobs. I got rejected from all of them. It doesn't seem to be a great job market because, to be perfectly honest right now, if the choice between doing a job that doesn't necessarily advance my career as an engineer or having the rest of my summer to continue to work on my writing and other creative projects, I'd rather just work on my creative projects. I know that might seem a little bit short-sighted, but hey, publishing a book has been a dream of mine for a long time. And in order to publish a book, you have to write one. And right now, I see an opportunity in front of me to not only write a book, I have the time to write a good one. That being said, I am going to keep on applying and see what happens. The other thing I have to do is directly related to my previous video. In my previous vlog, I kind of realized that I'm a terrible typer, and I kind of put a plan in place to see if I can improve my typing. I haven't been perfect, but I have done a good job of spending about 15 minutes a day on most days practicing my typing. So I want to test myself and see if my typing has actually improved so far. I don't expect this to be a process that happens overnight. It's going to take time for me to learn how to type better, especially since I've built up bad habits over a long period of time. But to be honest, while I was writing this week, I feel like I was doing a better job typing, so we'll see. But first, I have to apply to some jobs. So I found 1 or 2 job offerings on Handshake and I applied to them. To be honest, there really aren't that many new listings. It is a little frustrating to see the same job listings week after week, especially after you applied to those jobs and got rejected because you applied to those jobs, they weren't interested in you, and yet they're still looking for candidates. But hey, the world is a tough place. I'm not going to let it get me down. I might actually start applying to computer engineering internships. To be honest, it's not exactly ideal, especially with the pay they offer compared to the skills they require, but you know what? It's a foot in the door. And on a bright note, if I land an internship for the summer instead of a job, I will have more time to focus on my writing. At least I hope I would have more time. This job hunting stuff can be pretty depressing though, so I'm going to go test my typing skills now. So when I took this typing test last week, I got a 28, which is below the average of 36. I don't think I can possibly do worse, but we'll see. Okay, so last time I wrote 28 words in a minute, this time I wrote 40. So a 12-word increase. Now, to be fair, that's still below the line that the website views to be fluent, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. I do still feel myself focusing too much on certain fingers, so moving forward, I do still need to focus on using the right fingers to type the right keys. But yeah, so far, putting 15 minutes a week into this is definitely showing some results. And that's great because the less I'm focusing on typing while I'm writing, the more I can focus on actually writing. I think this calls for one last celebratory brainstorming session. So in that last brainstorming session, I think I came up with a few decent ideas. I think my favorite idea I came up with is an arc where there's a consistent dose of neurotoxin being released to the residents at all times. I think that one was kind of inspired by all the neurotoxin references in the Portal video game, one of my favorites. But yeah, it's actually pretty normal for me for the ideas to kind of dry up when I've been brainstorming a lot during a short period of time. I think one of the major reasons for that is when you're brainstorming a lot, you kind of get stuck on the same ideas. And then the other reason I think that happens is when you're brainstorming, you're kind of drawing from events in your life and your surroundings. And when you brainstorm a lot in the same location, you're kind of drawing on the same inspiration. There's only so many ideas you can come up with. That being said, the ideas I came up with are more than enough to push me into the next few weeks. In total, I've written around 21,000 words this week, which means my total is 57,000 words since I started this vlog series. Again, 57,000 words in 3 weeks, I could not be off to a better start. I'm also on a 21-day writing streak, and yeah, I think that's the longest writing streak I've had in years. It honestly might be the longest writing streak I've ever had. The good writing waves aren't going to last forever, but I'm going to ride them as long as I can. And I really do think that your support watching these videos has been a huge help and inspired me to push myself a little harder than I normally would. So thank you for taking interest in my writing journey. Let me know in the comments what parts of my writing process you're interested in seeing more about. As you've probably already noticed, I kind of like to give all these vlogs some sort of theme to kind of center around. This vlog was obviously about brainstorming. Going into next week, I really want to keep the streak of writing around 3,000 words per day going. Obviously, it's been pretty sustainable so far, so I want to keep that going as long as I possibly can. Next week, I feel like I want to focus a bit more on my reading goals because I feel like reading has taken a backseat to my writing goals. I've been reading some short stories here and there, but I can definitely read a lot more. Thank you so much for watching this vlog. If you can, be sure to leave a comment. I love having conversation with you guys in the comments. A lot of times these vlogs can be a one-sided conversation, so I love to get input back from you guys and start a real conversation. And finally, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. Who knows, maybe this channel really takes off. I won't have to get a job after all. Dad, if you're watching this, I swear that was a joke. Have a great week and good luck on your writing journeys. Bye.